Ah, there we go. Okay. I was like, why am I not on the stream? Okay. I think... that'll do it. Okay. Alaskan Fire it is. Alright, we had just... when last we left... where were we? We were on catching some rays, if I remember right. There it is. Let's get the voice demos up. Excellent. Hello. The first, we have 2 viewers. The first viewers have arrived. Cool. I'm gonna wait just a minute for any others that might want to show up. And then, in the meantime, we will work on... Alright. Come on, Blaze. You know this fucking door won't do shit. Let me in. Yeah, so we're right around here for him. Minus that voice crack, of course. Jack Thornton didn't beg. Let me just double check that I am leaving off in the correct place. How's everyone doing? I think I see 2 people here, unless one of them... Oh, right, one of them is me. I'm one of my own viewers, because I like to be able to check in and make sure the stream is actually working. Let's open up those Alaskan Fire voice files. And just make sure I get Jack right. Okay. So... why is my sound so screwed up? Do I sound okay? On your end? Let me check something. Something's wrong with my... it's coming out weird on my end. Just gonna check to make sure my sound's good. How are we sounding here? Just gonna check to make sure my sound's good. That doesn't sound right at all. Yeah, did my device switch? Yeah, that sounds like I'm recording through the camera. Yeah, that sounds completely like I'm recording through the camera. Give me a second, I'm not sure what's going on. Hello, Facebook user. Yeah, you can send out an email blast if you want. Give me a sec before you do that, though. I need to figure out why my why my mic sounds off, because I just played back a sample and it sounded like I was recording through, like the DAW was recording through the camera mic, and that would be really bad. If I were to record an entire 90 minute to 120 minute session and have it just completely be unusable. Okay, I think we're good there. I think we ended. Yeah, okay, cool. We ended on chapter 6, so let's open up the live set for chapter 2. Alright. One more check, because now it's got me all paranoid. Like, no, don't do that. Record properly. Okay. Set this. Set stream deck to Ableton. Like set phasers to stun. Stop real quick. Just doing a quick mic check on Ableton just to make sure we're sounding okay. And if we are good there, then we shall begin with catching some rays. Okay, cool, we're good. My paranoia was unfounded, but you know what? I'm okay with that. Alright. If we are ready, everyone, let's make sure the camera didn't shift angles when I punched my mic improperly the first couple of times. Yeah, I'm off slightly. Gotta get in frame there. Okay. And we are ready. In 3, 2, 1. Oh, false start. What are you doing? What are you doing, computer? All right. Chapter 7. Catching some rays. He'd made her cry. Jesus. He wasn't trying to make her cry. He'd just been trying to do... What, prove that she wasn't as smart as she thought she was? Prove to her he wasn't stupid? So what if he never went to school? He had plenty of smarts and other stuff. It wasn't like books were what was important in life anyway. And hell, she had tried to make him feel stupid. And after he tried to break the ice by letting her in on his horrible little secret. That was her fault. So he couldn't read, big deal. There were plenty of people who couldn't read. She shouldn't have rubbed it in like that. She'd been asking for an attitude adjustment. Yet, despite all that, as Jack watched Blaze go, he still felt like an utter shitheel. She'd given him a chance to shape up his act, and he'd screwed the pooch even worse than before. All because he couldn't get his damn tongue to work the way he wanted it to. Once she disappeared inside the lodge, he glanced down at his little pile of tools. Miserable. Way to go, Jackie boy. Jack thought, disgusted. She's gonna be on the next flight out of here. Maybe she wasn't gonna sing like a canary, but he doubted she was gonna hang around much longer. Sighing, Jack put the wrenches aside and got back to his feet. If there was one thing he learned about women, it was that it was best to apologize first, then figure out if you were wrong later. Well, it was even better if you just assumed you were wrong in the first place. But Jack wasn't about to belly up to the sexy giantess. He'd already handed over 30 acres of his land and spent a good portion of the summer... handed over 30 acres of his land. And back. Okay. He'd already handed over 30 acres of his land. No. Don't crack, voice. He'd already handed over 30 acres of his land and spent a good portion of the summer putting her place back together for her, and like hell he was going to start crawling around on his hands and knees asking forgiveness for her trying to make him feel stupid. Jack Thornton didn't beg. Muttering, Jack went back inside and walked to the door of her room, which was locked. Sighing as he twisted the knob, Jack said, "Come on, Blaze. You know this fucking door won't do shit. Let me in." She answered him with silence. Jack narrowed his eyes and dropped his hand from the knob. Do not be an asshole. It had become a private mantra for him for the last couple months. Don't be an asshole. Don't be an asshole. About 1 out of 10 times it worked. This time happened to be one of them. Instead of putting his fist through the drywall and unlocking the door from the inside, Jack cleared his throat and muttered, "Sorry." Silence on the other side. Immediately, Jack bristled. "What? You're gonna give me the silent treatment? Make me beg?" She said nothing. Remembering what happened last time he got the silent treatment, Jack stuck his ear to the door and listened. He could hear her breathing. "Okay, Toots," Jack growled. "You and I are going to come to an understanding. You might own this place, but I'm living here with you from now on. And seeing how I'm the one doing all the repairs, I've got no problems busting down a goddamn door so I don't have to sneak through a... So I don't have to speak through a fucking wall because you're having a pity fest on the other side." Nothing. "I'm serious," Jack warned. "Open the door." She was still in there, but she was completely ignoring him. He narrowed his eyes a long moment, then grated, "Please?" She didn't even shift on the bed. Didn't even make any indication she'd heard him. Jack had a moment of panic, wondering if she'd set up her phone with another recording. But when he got on his knees and sniffed under the door, he could smell her in there. Her and... Fire? Jack wrinkled his nose and sniffed again. Yes, he was pretty sure he smelled smoke. "Okay, sweetheart," he growled. "I'm getting fucking sick of the silent treatment. What are you burning in there?" She continued to ignore him. "Please let me in," Jack muttered, when the acrid smell of... When the acrid smell under the door continued to get stronger. He tried to think of what she could be setting on fire. The bed? Her underwear? Books? His eyes widened slightly as he remembered the book she'd brought out with her. "Oh, no, please, honey, no, don't burn it. I really want to learn, I swear. Please don't do that." The stench continued, and this time he saw lines of smoke pass under the door. Seeing that, Jack narrowed his eyes. "Okay, I'm trying really hard not to be an asshole, Sweet Cheeks, but you're being a real pain in the ass. So I hurt your fucking feelings. I'm sorry. Just don't burn the damn book, okay? I'll teach you anything you want to know. Just cut the fucking bullshit and open the door so we can talk, or I'll bust it down. At her continued silence, he tapped politely on the door again. Last chance. Let me in and talk to me. Please. She still wasn't listening to him. Okay. So, maybe he needed to class it up a bit. She was a rich brat, high society. She probably didn't appreciate the crude little clusterfuck of Werverine cursing at her. She probably didn't appreciate the crude little clusterfuck of a Werverine cursing at her through a door. Jack took several steadying breaths. What would a Feylord say? It pains me to see you in such distress at my hand. Please, end this silence, and allow me to make amends for my past misdeeds. I am pained that you are upset. Listening to her continue to mock him with silence, Jack found himself getting more and more irritated, and it was becoming difficult to think straight. All he wanted to do was put his fist through the door. Don't be an asshole, he thought, taking a deep breath. Don't be an asshole. Think about this, you dumbass. You can do this. You've got time. No pressure. He concentrated, trying hard to work out exactly what he could say that would make her stop being a stuck-up, pity-partying drama queen. He thought again of the arrogant, prissy Feylords he had known in his time. Remembered how eloquently they had wooed the ladies right out from under him. He scrunched his nose, remembering their flowery speech, trying to force it to the socially inept little half-busted crankcase that was Jack. It wasn't my intent to deliver such sorrows to you. Blessed of my heart, please, vanquish this bitter portal and allow me to bear your troubles with you. Or I'll be forced to take out my rage on your current abode. Open the door or I'll beat it the fuck down. This time, when she ignored him, Jack's hands tightened into fists on a surge of rage. All right, sugar. You were warned. He took a step backwards, leaned back, and put his fist through the door. Casually, he reached through. Casually, he reached through and unlocked it. Then he yanked his arm back through the hole, twisted the knob, and pushed the door open. Okay, just shut up and listen while I... Blaze? Blaze's shirt, piled in a corner by the door, was on fire. It was smoldering on the sleeves and down to the front, working in slow, outward-spreading bubbles of flame. Blaze, for her part, appeared to be unconscious, tucked under a blanket, looking rather peaceful. Jack said, glancing from Blaze to the burning shirt and back. Why'd you set your shirt on? Then he froze. He knew what this was. The feather. She'd activated it. And she'd been crying. Oh shit. Okay, never mind. You just stay right there, honey buns, and I'll take care of everything. He reached down to grab a fistful of the shirt, then howled when the tear-stained cloth came into contact with his hands. Oh, fuck! He dropped it into a smoldering pile on the floor at his feet, shaking out his palm. When he examined his skin for boils, he found there were no burns, but it still hurt like a bitch. Like he'd reached into a blacksmith's forge and dragged out a handful of white-hot coals. Then, realizing from the wisps of smoke coming from the hardwood floor under the smoldering wad of cotton that the shirt was about to set the house on fire, he squatted to pick it up again. Careful to touch the back of the shirt, Jack yanked it off of the floor, hurried over to the wood stove and tossed the garment inside. "Okay, sweetie, it's all better now," he said, locking the wood stove door behind it and coming back inside to peer at Blaze worriedly. She appeared to be sleeping peacefully, not even having stirred at his commotion. He frowned. "Blaze?" When she didn't respond, he eased a little closer, then squatted slowly beside her bed. "Blaze?" he asked again. When she didn't stir, he reached up and touched her forehead. Immediately, he wrenched his hand away with a hiss. Her head was like ice. "Okay, Pumpkin," Jack said, trying not to hyperventilate. "You're scaring the shit out of me here, dear. What do I do?" She just lay there, like a Yeti-sized ice cube, completely unresponsive. "Fuck me," Jack managed, watching her. He tested her temperature again with his palm, just to make sure he wasn't overreacting, then decided when his fingers came back numb that, yes, there was definitely something very wrong with her. He ran upstairs, grabbed a thermometer from the owner's apartment, and came running back. "Okay, honey, open up," he said, sticking it into her mouth, not really caring for what kind of cooties it had on it when she had the same general temperature as the inside of it. Screw that up. Not really caring what kind of cooties it had on it when she had the same general temperature as the inside of a commercial refrigerator. Seeing that the little silver bar on the thermometer didn't even climb out of the bulb to pass to the first set of notches, Jack realized he had a serious problem on his hands. But what did you do with a fourth lander who was, to all appearances, dying in her bed? The sun, Jack thought. He needed to get her into the sun. He dropped the thermometer back into its handy little plastic pouch and tossed it aside. "Okay, honey. You just hold on. I'm gonna take you outside, get you warmed up, okay?" He stood up and yanked back the blanket, intending to flip her over his shoulder. I keep slurring words. Intending to flip her over his shoulder, then froze. "Oh," he said, at her long ivory body, as perfect and unobstructed as the day she was born. He swallowed hard. "Oh, what was it with girls nowadays? Didn't they at least wear a nightie or something, long johns? Something? No wonder she was cold. She didn't have anything on under there. She was stark naked. Nothing but pale, gorgeous skin. Lily white, delicate curves. Perfect round breasts with little spatterings of freckles down the stomach." Jack realized he was staring. He quickly tucked the blanket back over her and tried to get hold on himself. "That was your fault for not wearing pajamas," he muttered, flushing hard enough to make his ears burn. What kind of decent woman doesn't wear pajamas? If she heard him, his Yeti-sized ice cube made no response. And after that little blunder, Jack was pretty sure she wasn't faking. The Blaze he knew would have been hollering hidey-ho if she'd even suspected the hairy little curmudgeon wanted to look at what was under her... Ran out of breath. The Blaze he knew would have been hollering hidey-ho if she'd even suspected the hairy little curmudgeon wanted to look at what was under her 4 extra long combat pants. I need to do that again. I keep running out of breath. The Blaze he knew? Wait, what the hell? Oh, right, okay. The Blaze he knew would have been hollering hidey-ho if she'd even suspected the hairy little curmudgeon wanted to look at what was under her 4 extra long combat pants. Okay, gorgeous, he growled, wrapping her up in a blanket and heaving his Yeti burrito over his shoulder. I'm gonna go save your life. You get pissy with me? I'll just eat you. He carried her back out the ruined door, up through the lodge and out to the front porch, and laid her down gently on the creaky spruce planks. Squinting up at the sun, he unwrapped her and then quickly turned his back to make sure any nosy, dumb-shit neighbors kept their distance. After a good hour in full sunlight, Jack reluctantly glanced back over his shoulder. The leggy Fourthlander lay where he'd left her, soaking up the rays with that deliciously pale, curvaceous... Jack quickly looked away again. Getting up, he backed up to her and carefully reached a hand behind him, aiming for an arm. His fingers hit what he was pretty sure was a warm, supple human breast. Crying out, he jerked his hand away. "Sorry," he stammered. "Sorry, I was reaching for your arm and..." The leggy Aphrodite continued to sleep peacefully. "Okay, babe," Jack said, quickly grabbing the blanket and flipping it back over her. "You got your rays. Time to take you back inside before you wake up and take this all the wrong way." Once he was sure she was good and covered, Jack turned, gathered up his Yeti burrito, and once more threw her over his shoulder. He trundled back down through the lodge and deposited her on her bed. Then, once she was tucked in, he went looking for a screwdriver. As quietly as he could, he unscrewed the door from its hinges, pulled it aside, took it upstairs, replaced it for one in one of the far guest rooms where she wasn't likely to notice for a while, and brought the fresh door down and screwed it into place. Then, when he was pretty sure he'd done all for her he could, he locked the inside latch and yanked the door shut behind him. Then, sweating, he started pacing back and forth outside her door, cursing himself for locking it, wondering if he was going to have to make another trip upstairs with a screwdriver. "Where are my clothes?" Blaze demanded, storming up the stairs to slap a gigantor hand on the table beside Jack's plate of eggs. She was wearing a shirt that still had creases from the nice little department store package she'd taken it from, because somewhere during the night, even through a locked door, her flannel shirt from yesterday had gone missing. The Werverine said, blinking up at her over the kitchen table. "What shirt?" Blaze narrowed her eyes at him. "I said clothes, not shirt, Jack." Then, before Jack could spout some bullshit story about how, gee, this neck of the woods is habited... Then, before Jack could spout some bullshit story about how, gee, this neck of the woods is inhabited by Marty, the shirt-stealing marshmallow, she swiveled and started down the stairs. "Where are you going?" he called after her, sounding a bit concerned. "I'm gonna go run the dozer a bit." She went outside, yanked her boots on, and strode across the yard. She could feel Jack watching her through the second-floor window as she hopped up onto the wide metal track and climbed into the driver's seat. Ignoring him completely, she turned the key in the ignition and cranked the engine over. For the first time in weeks, the engine roared to life. She lifted the blade, backed it up, and started attacking the edge of the forest once again. A couple hours later, she was really settling into the groove, learning the machine, relieving all her tension in the upturned earth, when the engine sputtered and died. Blaze frowned and turned the key again, but the engine cranked over uncooperatively. "Sounds like it ran out of fuel," Jack called from behind her. Blaze twisted to look over her shoulder. The Werverine was sitting on the trailer, watching her, idly playing with a set of vice grips. He dropped the tool back to the trailer and got to his feet, making the springs groan from the sudden release of weight. She expected a sneer or a quippy comment, but instead he gestured for her to get down from the dozer. "Come on over to the fuel shed with me." "Come on over to the fuel shed with me," he called. "Generator's running. I'll show you how to run the pump." He seemed to hesitate, then, waiting to see if she would follow. I screwed up the emphasis. "I'll show you how to run the pump." He seemed to hesitate then, waiting to see if she would follow. Blaze turned again to look at the bulldozer's controls, then, Reluctantly, she climbed out of the driver's seat and hopped off the track, into the soft earth. Seeing her get down, Jack started toward the smallest shed on the property. Once Blaze arrived at the barrel-filled shack, Jack flipped a switch on the wall that made the ancient gas station pump start to hum, then went and grabbed a yellow plastic gas carrier off a shelf and set it on the wooden planks between the barrels. Blaze had to stoop to enter the tiny shack. Once she was inside, there wasn't much space to maneuver, and Jack's leaden arm brushed her stomach as he uncapped one of the barrels and stuck a metal-ended hose inside. "This is diesel," he said, dipping his fingers into the liquid inside the barrel and holding it up to her. "Big rigs like the dozer and the backhoe are going to use diesel. We keep the diesel in the green barrels." He wiped his hand off on his pants and went for the line of blue barrels opposite the green ones. After twisting off the cap with a four-pronged metal lever, he dipped his finger into the second barrel and held it up to her. "Gas," he said. "Short for gasoline." "I know what gas is," Blaze growled, scrunching her nose at the slight difference in smell. Jack shrugged and recapped the barrel. "In the fuel business, we call gas gas and diesel oil. You don't say you need gas for your dozer. People will look at you funny. Because you put gas in your dozer, you kill your dozer." Blaze watched him suspiciously, trying to figure out why he was suddenly being so nice. Wait, what the hell? Jack shrugged and Oh man, it stopped recording that line. Alright, I gotta re-record that. Alright. There we go. In the fuel business, we call gas gas and diesel oil. You don't say you need gas for your dozer. People will look at you funny. Because you put gas in your dozer, you kill your dozer. Blaze watched him suspiciously, trying to figure out why he was suddenly being so nice. Finally, she decided, "You're afraid I'm gonna take that cell phone out of your pay, aren't you?" He blinked at her. "What?" She made a gesture at the barrels. "Why are you being so nice all of a sudden? What did you do, aside from steal my shirt?" Jack's brilliant green eyes widened for a moment. Then he cleared his throat and turned back to his work, but not before she saw him redden. Instead of responding, he pulled the hose nozzle off of the ancient pump, then stuffed it into the yellow canister. "We use the yellow jugs for diesel, the red ones for gas." "It says it on the side," Blaze commented. Jack's entire body went stiff, and she saw his green eyes flicker at the lettering on the side of the canister. Before he could get offended, however, Blaze squatted and pointed to the first letter on the canister. "That's a D. It's used for duh sounds, like drugs, dick, or dumb shit." Jack's face reddened, and he flipped on the pump. Liquid began to slosh into the yellow canister. "Next two are I and E," Blaze said. "Usually they have their own separate sounds, but English is a fucked up language, and in diesel they both sound like a hard E, like mean, or scream, or steam." Jack cleared his throat uncomfortably, but she could tell he was paying attention. He finished filling the canister and switched off the pump. "Next is an S," Blaze said, pointing. "Used for things like scumbag, or shithead, or stupid, stubborn asshole." He flushed crimson and looked away in agitation. "That right there is another E," Blaze said, tapping it. "E can have a bunch of different sounds in the English language, but this time it's kind of silent. The last one is an L." She smiled up at him. "Used for words like little, laughable, or lewd." Jack glared up at her and yanked the canister off of the ground. "I'll keep that in mind." His big shoulders flexing under his blue flannel shirt, he stalked out of the shed and out toward the bulldozer. Blaze grinned as she watched him go. "Maybe we can work together after all." Blaze again felt herself admiring the rock-hard features of his body, the clefts and bulges pushed tight against his well-used clothes. She was still watching him, appreciating his confident, sexy swagger, when she saw a light flicker out of the corner of her eye, near where her hand was resting on the door jamb. Frowning, Blaze turned back to the shed. The green speck winked out the moment she looked at it, and she was about to shake her head and write it off as the gas fumes getting to her, when it popped back into sight a few yards. Away at the edge of the forest. When she turned to face it completely, however, the light slid deeper into the forest, then winked out. She saw it there, blinking off and on, keeping its distance. Feeling a tightness work its way into her gut, Blaze backed up. Then, when she was sure whatever it was wasn't going to lunge out at her, she turned and bolted for Jack. Jack had just climbed atop the bulldozer and was uncapping the cap from the fuel tank on the side of the machine. He didn't even look up. "I saw something!" Blaze cried, climbing up onto the dozer with him, putting him between her and the strange green light. Jack grunted and pulled the collapsible tube from the canister, then leaned it up against the bulldozer and started to pour. "A green light," Blaze babbled. "It was bobbing around near my hand, then took off for the woods when I saw it, winking in and out, size of a fist." She was panting, gasping for air. "Faye," Jack said. "A young one, don't worry about it." "Faye?" Blaze said. "I thought you said Faye would want the fet—" Jack slammed the diesel canister back on the dozer and gave her a look. "Just 'cause you can't see 'em," he said softly, capping the gas tank again, "don't mean they aren't out there, sweetie." With another scowl at her, he resealed the canister and hopped off the dozer. "Where are you going?" Blaze cried. "I've got things to do," Jack said. "We're gonna need a ton of firewood come fall, and that green four-wheeler is knocking again. Think I'm gonna spend a couple hours tinkering with it before dinner." "What do I do about the Fae?" Blaze cried. He raised a jet-black eyebrow at her. "What do you mean, do? The Fae want to hang around, you leave them alone," he grunted. "Besides, it's not the babies you need to be worried about. Anything with wings is going to be more scared of you than you are of it. Moment you start seeing wingless teenagers running around, though, then you should start getting concerned. They're usually about 1,000 years old at that point." He gestured at the fuel shed. "Little guys like that, though?" he snorted. "They won't eat much." "You saw him," Blaze realized, horrified. Jack wrinkled his nose. "Smelled him, more like. Always makes me nervous when they hang out near the gas shed. Smell a lot like ozone. And I always wonder if they're gonna set off a spark to make the whole place explode." "But I thought you said the Fae would—" Blaze began. Jack stopped her with another look. Blaze said, reddening. "I thought you said you kept this place clean of intruders." "I do," Jack said. "Then why would you let them stay?" Blaze demanded. Jack gave her a long look. "Like I said, sister," he said, "it's not the babies you need to watch out for. They don't know any better, and they're harmless little buggers. Annoying sometimes, but what youngsters aren't?" He scowled out at the forest. "Nah, it's the big ones that'll rip you limb from limb. If I catch them sneaking..." "Nah, it's the big ones that'll rip limb from limb if I catch them sneaking around on my land." Blaze again felt herself tense at the way he said "my land." But before she could correct him, Jack had turned and started toward the four-wheeler trailer, which was still piled with drywall from the last barge trip. Blaze started after him to help. She had taken 2 steps when Jack dropped the fuel canister on the ground beside the four-wheeler, and as she watched, impressed, heaved an entire batch of drywall off the trailer at once and carried it inside the basement of the lodge. Then came back. Blaze had knocked down a dozen good-sized birch trees, threw on chaps, and started attacking the logs with a chainsaw. Reluctantly, Blaze crawled back up into the bulldozer's operator chair, nervously scanning the woods for little green glowies. Faye. like fairies. Of the abracadabra you now have ear... Ah, damn it. Of the abracadabra you now have ears like a donkey kind. It was just too much. Maybe she could open a seasonal greenhouse outside Anchorage. Anchorage. It was just too much. Maybe she could open a seasonal greenhouse outside Anchorage, or start a farm in the Matsu Valley, Wasilla or Palmer. Something a little less ambitious. Blaze nonetheless started the dozer and lifted the blade, and found herself immediately comforted by the low rumble around her. Then again, she thought, as she once more began to work the earth, watching Jack cut up the trees she'd downed for him, I might be able to make do. Her land-clearing endeavors, she decided, would need to include sites for a major greenhouse and a couple of livestock buildings. Her first set of stock, according to the plan she had developed before beginning this mess, would be delivered a month after the lumber loads in late August. Goats, rabbits, pigs, 2 dogs, plus a good 6 dozen of various fowl. Her plan included setting up fencing on a few acres of forested area, releasing the animals inside, and let the goats and pigs eat their way through the rest of the summer, supplemented with feed from Blaze's barge runs. The rabbits and fowl would be penned separately to protect from The rabbits and fowl would be penned separately to protect from martens, foxes, and goshawks. If it worked out, she would get a yak or 2 next spring, along with a few beef calves. Excitement began to build with every new stroke of the bulldozer's blade. Finally, she was doing something to see her dreams come true. Soon she would be neck-deep in endangered breeds of livestock, helping to carry on genetic diversity with critically rare breeds that had lost their commercial value due to hybridization or genetic improvements. Looking at the churned earth around her, however, Blaze realized she needed to stick with the plan. Take it slow. She remembered one of her algebra professor's favorite acronyms. KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Already her fantasies were running away with her. She wanted her farm, and she wanted it now. And her brain was politely overlooking the fact that she did... And her brain was politely overlooking the fact that she had precisely diddly in the form of structures, pens, and paddocks, and that it wouldn't be very genetically responsible to have foxes or wolves drag off a few dozen animals from breeds that, for some, only had 200 breeding individuals in North America. Just a little... and then my body made a gross noise. Just a little bit at a time, she told herself as she rolled another ball of roots out of the way of her building space. She would start small. Goats, pigs, rabbits, and fowl. If that worked out, she could think about the rest in the spring. That night, Jack met her by the wood stove with her smutty adventure book. He shoved it into her hands. "There you go, boss," he said. "Teach me to read." Blaze, hearing the command in his voice... Wait, I need to be more commanding. "Teach me to read." Damn it. "Teach me to read." Blaze, hearing the command in his voice, seeing that he fully expected to be obeyed, almost turned and set the book up high on a shelf, out of reach for him without use of a stool. She fought the urge, however, realizing he would probably just tear a few swipes through the wall until the shelf came to him. She forced a polite smile. "My name is Blaze." He squinted up at her, green eyes narrowed. "Sounded to me like your name was Beatrice." Blaze shuddered. "I'm getting it changed." Then she caught herself and frowned. "And that's none of your damn business. I want to be called Blaze, you call me Blaze." You can want to be called the Tooth Fairy for all I care, Jack said. He crossed his arms over his burly chest and nodded at the book in her hands. You gonna teach me to read that? Blaze narrowed her eyes at him. You got one hell of a way of asking nicely. Who said I was asking? Jack pulled a free hand and... Jack pulled a hand free and looked at the back of a fingernail. He stuck it in his mouth and started gnawing on it. Way I see things, sugar, he said around his finger. You need me a hell of a lot more than I need you. He spat whatever he'd collected from his nail onto the floor, scowled at his fingertips, then recrossed his arms. I've gone my whole life without books. You, I'd wager, probably never changed a carburetor or pulled a spark plug in your life. He gave her a polite smile. So, you gonna be reasonable? Blaze felt her lip curling in a snarl. You are not the only one who can change a spark plug. Maybe, Jack said. He casually leaned back against a corner wall. But I'm pretty sure that any other mechanic you hire won't stay long. He winked at her. Considering. I hate him, Blaze realized. And at the same time she wanted to rip out his guts and nail them to her wall. She was struck by how utterly sexy he was lounging against her wall, sleeves rolled up, big arms bunching against his chest. Muttering, she set the book down and went into her room. Hey, Jack growled, unfolding from the wall to quickly follow her. We had a bargain there, missy. Blaze ignored him and found her journal. She grabbed a couple sheets out of the back, ripped them free, and brushed past him to sit at one of the hand-hewn wooden chairs beside the fire. Sit down, she said, thrusting a heavy chair at him with her foot. Jack grunted as it hit him in the legs. Scowling at her warily, he brought it up beside her and sat down with his upper body leaning over the chair's back. She heard the wood creak, and wondered if he was about to snap off the backrest with his weight. How much do you weigh? She asked. As if knowing exactly why she was asking, Jack showed his teeth and leaned harder on the chair, and she heard the wood pop under the pressure. I break it, I'll fix it. You don't need to worry your pretty little head about it. That had been the excuse he'd used for everything, from tearing holes in her drywall to shattering her sink because he'd cut himself. Went a little Sean Connery there for a moment. To shattering her sink because he'd cut himself shaving. It's my money we're using to fix your damages, Blaze growled, watching the chair strain underneath him. He bared his teeth more. Take it out of my pay. She glared at him. Maybe I will. Fine, honey. You do that. As if it didn't matter to him one way or the other. After another moment of glaring at Jack, Blaze reluctantly looked back down at the notebook sheets, once again having to resist the urge to wad them up and put them somewhere out of reach. As legibly as she could, Blaze scrawled out the upper and lowercase alphabet on the top of the page. Her handwriting had never been particularly neat, described by most as deranged chicken scratch, but she went slowly. She had to erase several times. Penmanship had never been her strong suit, and bent over as she was, her hair kept getting in her face. She took a moment to pull off her hat, pull her thick carrot-orange hair out, comb the rat's nest with her fingers, and weave it back into a quick braid between the Q and the R. You got nice hair, Jack muttered, like he was mentioning a pustule growing from her forehead. He hadn't looked up from the page. Caught between frustration at Jack's complete, stubborn maleness and a little girly flutter of, he thinks my hair is pretty. Blaze quickly cleared her throat and ignored him completely. She tossed her boonie hat on the chair beside her, leaving her braid pulled over one shoulder. Once she had all 26 letters aligned out in 6 neat rows, she slapped the pen down in irritation. There, she muttered. The alphabet, 26 letters, both uppercase, that's the big ones, and lowercase, the little ones. When she looked up to make sure Jack was paying attention, he was staring at her, jaw open, appearing completely lost in thought. He didn't seem to notice she was talking to him. "You paying attention?" Blaze demanded, jabbing a finger at the letters. Jack blinked suddenly. "Huh?" He shook himself, frowning, and glanced down at the page of notes. When he saw them, he reddened. "Yeah?" he growled, bristling. "So?" "So? That's the alphabet," Blaze said, handing him the pencil and paper. "All the letters in the English language. You try." By the way he blushed, she might as well have asked him to strip down naked and pirouette for her. When he didn't reach for the proffered paper, she nudged him with it. "That's just gibberish," Jack growled. "What am I supposed to do with that?" "You learn them," Blaze sighed. Jack snorted. "I don't need to do that to learn." Blaze gave him a long look. When the Werverine just glared at her stubbornly, Blaze sighed and stood up. She went over to the nice warm wood stove and opened the door on the front. Jack flinched and lunged out of his seat, eyes on the papers. "What are you doing?" The panic in his voice... Ah, damn it, my body made a gross noise right after that line. "Stop doing that. It's annoying." The panic in his voice was almost comical. Blaze yawned. "I'm going to use this to heat my home because it's obviously no use to you." She moved to drop it through the open door. Jack jumped forward and caught her wrist, that feral growl deep in his chest. "Listen, Missy," he snarled. "It's in your best interest not to piss off the Werverine." She raised an eyebrow down at him. "Piss you off? Who said anything about pissing you off? I thought you didn't care about this gibberish." She moved to toss it into the fire anyway. Growling, Jack yanked her hand away from the fire and took the papers from her. He snatched up the pencil with his other hand, then slapped it all down on the seat of his chair and squatted beside it, glaring at her. Then, huffing like an angry bear, he took the pencil up in a fist and started scratching at the words. When Blaze immediately stepped closer to correct him, his back hunched in a flood of fur, and he sprouted teeth. Blaze quickly found something else to do. A few hours later, there was a knock at the door. "So, He had his big fingers wrapped around the pencil in a fist. He hadn't made more than a half-dozen of the letters on the page, and they all looked like someone had been trying to write the alphabet with a wrench. "I can't." His voice cracked. For the first time, Blaze realized the big baby was about to cry. She also realized that if she made a big deal of it, things were about to get really, really ugly. "Okay," she said, quickly putting down her book. "Well, you're holding the pencil wrong. It's gonna be tough, but you gotta train yourself to hold it like this." She took his... She took his huge, calloused, somewhat resistive hand and forcibly shaped it around the writing instrument. Like that. She grabbed him by a meaty shoulder and pulled him back over to the chair and set the paper down on it. "There. Copy them." She tried to push him into a squat, but it was like trying to bend the knees of a granite statue. "Oh, for Christ's sakes!" Blaze cried. She grabbed his hand and pulled it down to the paper. "There, see that? Draw them like that." Reluctantly, the Werverine did. As Blaze watched and helped with minor corrections here and there, he scratched out all 26 letters of the alphabet. "See?" Blaze cried, happily slapping him on the shoulder. "You did it!" Immediately, the Werverine's jaw went slack, and the pencil slid back into a fist. Seeing that, Blaze frowned, leaned in close, and readjusted his hand. "Gotta remember that position," Blaze said. "Can't write like a ham-fisted mechanic, okay? Gotta use finesse." Instead of looking down at the way she had positioned his fingers, however, the Werverine was staring up at her, mouth open again, He looked like a fox that had just realized there was a new chicken in the coop. Or a nerdy pervert imagining her in leather armor and broadsword. Blaze slapped the papers onto the chair. Blaze slapped the papers onto the chair in irritation. Growling, she got to her feet. "I don't do the barbarian thing," she growled, glaring down at him. Jack blinked up at her, the moment gone. "Huh?" "I like sex just as much as the next girl," Blaze gritted. "But the moment you try to get me to put on a breastplate and chainmail, we're done." Jack dropped the pencil and lunged to his feet. "Now hold on a second," he babbled. "I really don't know what you're—" "I've seen that look," Blaze snorted. "I know what it means. It means you've got some creepy part of your brain telling you want to be dominated by a big Amazon with a battle axe." When he didn't deny it, merely stared up at her, Blaze made a disgusted sound and pushed past him, back to her room. She slammed the door behind her and locked it. Then, quietly, she slid to her knees beside the bed and concentrated desperately on keeping her tears in check. Alrighty. That will conclude the first chapter of the day. Perfect. Okay, let's hit the next 10-minute mark. Oh, thank you. Yes, every time Jack calls her Missy. He's not winning points when he does that. Turns out, referring to your crush as such, unless explicitly requested, is a bad move. Oh, oh, I had no idea how much crap voice actors have to go through with their equipment until I started watching you and Jack. Yeah, audio is a finicky business, man. It's, you can love audio, but rarely will it ever love you back. Oh, man. Well, we have 6 people here. Welcome to those that just showed up. Thank you to those who have been watching so far, and thank you to those who just showed up, too. So for those just joining us, this is Alaskan Fire by the inimitable Sara King. It is a wonderful story that we've all been having a great time with. And, yes, I believe, as we speak, the very talented Emma Kate is recording her lines for Blaze on the first set, which was completed in the first 2 cold reads, which are also on the Sound Booth Theater YouTube channel if you want to go back and watch those. So that's all there. And then these actually, I just submitted the audio for the first 2 cold reads. These are going to show up on the Sound Booth Theater app. So you can always, if you want to carry all of my mistakes with you that I make while I record, have at it. Have fun with downloading that. And listening to me get frustrated at my equipment. While, of course, narrating a wonderful story. But, you know, you get to laugh at the story because the story's funny, and then you get to laugh at me because it's funny when I screw up. Yeah, it's cool that they do that. It's really cool of the editors to take the extra time. They mostly they'll just go through and like cut out the really long pauses, like if I have to step out for whatever reason. They'll cut that out, but otherwise, warts and all, as Jeff says. You get to hear everything. Emma do Blaze... No, unfortunately, we won't hear Emma until it's published because she's not... I don't think she's doing cold reads for this, and she's just reading her lines. But you'll hear my cold reads on the Sound Booth Theater app. So if you want to hear how I did a character... And then, although we do have Jeff guest spotting on Tuesday, I believe. Because by Tuesday we'll be at chapter 12. So you'll hear Jeff do Thunderbird in the cold reads. Because Thunderbird's first chapter is chapter 12, the back half, when he shows up. And thank you, Sara. When Thunderbird shows up for the first time and makes a very amusing first appearance because he's Thunderbird and that's what he does. Jeff will be joining me. And we'll get to... I think that's the first... I don't know if that's the first time SBT has done a dual-person cold read or not, but I'm very excited for that. That's going to be fun. Yeah. So stay tuned, because I do plan to do at least one more of these this week on Saturday. And then by the time I get to chapter 12, I'm going to pick it back up on Tuesday, when Jeff can join me. And then I'll just keep going until you know, I collapse from exhaustion. Because that's how we do. All right. On to Chapter 8, Yeti Wars. All right. Now I need to read that in my proper narration voice. Chapter 8, Yeti Wars. When Blaze crawled out of bed the next morning, her handyman was nowhere to be found. Stumbling, still groggy from lack of caffeine, Blaze was settling the coffee pot on the wood stove when she caught sight of the sheet of letters on the chair, right where she had left it. Disgusted, she took out the filter, tapped the grinds into the compost, and refilled the percolator. She was yawning, trudging past the chair on her way back from the bathroom, when she realized the page looked different than before. She paused, frowning down at the letters. Jack had filled the page with a crude alphabet, upper and lower. Now I need to emphasize that more. I slurred the word with. What the heck? Was it not playing back? Speaking of crap to go through with my equipment, what are you doing, Ableton? Why isn't it playing back? Oh, okay, it's frowning down. Okay. There we go. Frowning down at the letters. Jack had filled the page with a crude alphabet, upper and lowercase. When she picked up the page, she saw that the back, too, was covered with painstakingly etched letters, as was the next 2 pages. Every square inch of surface area he had filled with letters. Blaze was still staring at it when she heard someone step onto the porch. She quickly put the papers back and arranged them roughly as she had found them, then hurriedly moved to the stove, pretending to warm herself as the coffee percolated. A moment later, Jack yanked the door open and stepped inside with a bundle of firewood in one big arm. "Morning," he said as he shut the door behind him. "Boiler's been going since 6, so there's hot water for a shower." His eyes flickered to the papers on the chair, then away again. Now that he mentioned it, Jack looked cleaner today. When he grew close, Blaze thought she smelled cologne. "A shower sounds great," Blaze said. Jack paused in unloading the pile in his arms. "What, you think that was a suggestion?" He snorted and dumped the rest of the wood to the metal spark guard surrounding the wood stove. "You stink like diesel fuel, and you look like you went rooting around in the yard with those pigs you keep talking about. I got tired of smelling your grimy ass." He took something from his pocket and shoved something against her stomach. When Blaze blinked down at it, her hands came away with a bar of soap. Then Jack went back to stacking wood like he'd said absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. Suddenly, something profound occurred to Blaze. "You've never had to live with a woman before, have you?" Jack hesitated in piling wood. "Don't know what you're talking about," he said without looking up. "This really long life you claim you've had?" Blaze insisted, gesturing at him with the soap. "Throughout it all, you never had a woman, did you? You were too much of a crass, grumpy, egotistical prick. You ran them all off." Jack deposited the last of the wood on top of the stack a bit harder than was necessary. Glaring up at her, he growled, "I've had women before." "Oh yeah?" Blaze laughed, crossing her arms over her chest. "Like when?" Bristling, Jack got to his feet and said, "Like about 6 years ago, right before I found pieces of her scattered all over my yard." Blaze froze, her blood running cold. "I thought you didn't know if she survived." Jack shrugged. "Never found any particularly important pieces." "You found pieces of her, and you think she might have—" Blaze thought she might be ill. Jack gave her a flat look. "It's hard to kill aware." Blaze glanced out at the verdant trees through the window. Suddenly, the alders and other low-lying bushes seemed to take on a new, more sinister purpose. She wondered what kinds of things could be hiding behind the screen of leaves, just out of sight. Immediately, she shied a bit closer to Jack, swallowing hard. "They're not coming onto my land again, without a special invitation," Jack said, following her gaze. "I made sure of that." "How?" Blaze asked, suddenly very much craving to hear how much of a badass her new business partner was. "Sponged the pack leader and 6 of his lieutenants," Jack said, turning to look at her. "Sent the rest of them off to lick their wounds." "How'd you survive?" Blaze whispered. He grunted. "They're just puppies. As old as I am, it was like slapping around some toddlers." Blaze squinted at him. He looked to be in his late 20s, maybe as old as 30. "Just how old are you?" He gave her a wary look. "Might want to use the upstairs bathroom. I'm going to be regrouting the floor on this one in the next few days, and I don't want it wet." Then he turned his big back on her again, heading for the door. "Hey!" Blaze snapped. "I already know you're a werevine. What's it gonna hurt?" Jack hesitated at the door. When he looked back at her, his green eyes were cautious. He sniffed, then rubbed a greasy wrist across his face, then fidgeted with some wood chips clinging to his shirt. Finally, he said, "You know those barbarians you keep talking about?" It took Blaze a minute to realize he meant Vikings. Then she nodded slowly. "I was on the raid on Lindisfarne Abbey." Lindisfarne. No, I need to say that better. Let me double check something. Lindisfarne. I don't like the way I'm saying that.
Often monasteries like the one at Lindisfarne
Lindisfarne, okay. A little more of an accent. Just say it right, but a little more. Okay. I was on the raid on Lindisfarne Abbey. The way he said the name sounded foreign, almost like he wasn't speaking English. Then he yanked the door open, leaving her frowning after him. Blaze puzzled on that all through her shower, racking her brain as she tried to remember her freshman European history class. By the time she'd gotten out and toweled off, she had narrowed it down to one of 2 major attacks, both perpetuated by Vikings. Depending on which one, that meant he could be anywhere from 900 to 1,200 years old. She was laughing when she stepped out of the bathroom. Head still wrapped in a towel, she stuck her feet into a pair of shoes and went marching to the shop, where she found him bent over the innards of another chainsaw. He turned when he heard her coming. "Do you actually mean to tell me," Blaze said, jabbing a finger into his thick chest, "that you were born a millennium ago?" Jack didn't even flinch. "Never said I was born then," he said. "Just said I went on a raid." He went unconcernedly back to the chainsaw. "Not actually sure when I was born, but I'd guess 5 or 6 times that. Hard to tell. Never really kept track. Think I was made somewhere in Russia, though. Remember being a trapper's son, and he came home covered in blood one day. Bit me a couple months after, I think. Then the village killed him, chased me out into the woods, and I began my life on the fringe of society." Blaze's mouth fell open. "You mean you can do stuff like..." She raked her brain for something completely absurd. "Make a sword?" "What kind you want?" Jack said distractedly. "Bastard sword, longsword, rapier, zweihander, cutlass, saber, claymore?" He started fiddling with the greasy parts on the table in front of him. "Even spent some time in the Orient, so I can make a decent katana, or talwar, or jian, though I'm by no means a master at those." He plucked a little plastic piece from the mess and fit it back into the chainsaw. "Even tried my hand at Damascus steel, but that was a real pain in the ass. Had to get the mixture just right, and only about half of them turned out good in the end anyway." Blaze narrowed her eyes. The process of making Damascus steel was lost in the 1750s. She knew because she had done her European history term paper on the subject. Several modern-day swordmakers claimed to make Damascus steel, but none could compare to the real thing. "Was it?" He flicked a bit of grime off of a circular rubber ring and fitted it back into the chainsaw. "You are not 6,000 years old." He gave her an irritated look as he replaced a screw into the main compartment. 6,000 is nothing, dearie. You want to be blown away? Take a vacation up to the Brooks Range and go find yourself a dragon. They don't die of old age." "And you do?" Blaze scoffed. He grinned at her, and she saw fangs. "Not old age, per se. More like differences of opinion." Blaze glared at him, still not sure he wasn't completely pulling her leg. "And dragons?" He shrugged and wiped his greasy fingers on his pants. "Dragons are a bit harder to drag into a fist fight. Lots of posturing, very little fang. Well, the old ones, anyway. Would rather look down their noses at you and quote poetry and hold grudges than settle it like men." Unfortunately, the sound coming up from my throat was not what would have been very relevant fire breathing. It was just a gross noise. So now we have to stop. Okay. He slapped the cover on the chainsaw, used a screwdriver to cinch it down, then hefted it off the table. Grabbing the pull cord in one hand, the front handle in the other, he said, "Stuck-up pussies." He yanked the chainsaw cord, and suddenly the machine came to life in his hand. Blaze took a nervous step backwards, watching as he started the blade running along its track in a high-pitched whine. "So I take it you haven't had any differences of opinion?" she asked when he made a satisfied nod and shut it off. Jack dropped the chainsaw back to the table. "None I lost." Blaze peered at him. 6,000 years and you've never lost a fight. Jack went to the wall and pulled down a set of what looked like cowboy chaps. These he cinched around his waist, then clipped around the backs of his legs. He found a set of yellow headphones hanging on a nearby peg and grabbed those, too. Then, picking up the chainsaw, he walked out of the shop. "Never?" Blaze demanded, following him. He glanced over a big shoulder at her. "I'm still here, aren't I?" She caught up to him. "You ever fight a dragon?" He gave her an irritated look. "Do I look stupid to you?" Blaze grinned. Jack stopped, halfway across the yard toward the jumble of downed trees she had put there, and smirked up at her. Way too confidently, he said, That's not the general idea I get every time I catch you staring at my sexy ass, honey. Blaze flushed crimson. She hadn't realized he'd noticed. Jack got a smug look. Thought so. He turned and walked away, and made a show of flexing his jeans as he went. Before meeting the bastard, Blaze would have been so horrified that she probably would have hidden in her room and stayed there for a few days out of utter, humiliating shame. But after almost 2 months of dealing with his shit, she only narrowed her eyes and jogged to catch up. "And what about you?" she asked, keeping stride. Jack gave her an uncertain look. "What do you mean?" "I've caught you staring," Blaze said. "Caught you staring last night, in fact, twice." Jack's face reddened to a faint purple. "See?" Blaze cried in triumph. "Two can play at this game, bastard." "I totally turn you on, don't I?" "Lady," Jack growled, setting the chainsaw down on a fallen tree while he adjusted his headset. He smiled at her, and it was vicious. "Seeing how you want to play this game and all, I should probably clue you in a little bit. Only fair." Frowning, Blaze said, "What do you mean?" "I don't go for tall chicks," Jack said, yanking the cord on the chainsaw. "Yeti isn't my style." He gunned the engine then as she stared at him, horror reeking cold, twisting tendrils of shame through her stomach. He unconcernedly started driving the blade through the tree. Oh, I put that in the wrong track. I said it right. The emphasis on that was all wrong anyway. Let's do this. He gunned the engine. Then, as she stared at him, horror-reeking, cold, twisting tendrils of shame through her stomach, he unconcernedly started driving the blade through the tree. Jack winced as Blaze ran back to the house and disappeared in the basement. He cut the power to the chainsaw and lowered the blade to rest on the half-chopped log, his heart pounding. It had taken every ounce of willpower he had to look up into her eyes and tell her he didn't go for the tall chicks. Fuck, every girl he'd ever fallen for had been taller than him. Hell, Melee had almost matched Blaze for height. He liked him tall. More chimney to crawl up, damn it. But she had pushed him. And if she had noticed, that meant he was a hell of a lot more turned on than he had thought, and he refused to do that to a woman again. He couldn't let his damned hormones get another girl killed. He'd rather go dig his own grave. An apology was necessary for sure this time, he knew. He'd stuck his foot so far in his mouth he was choking on calf. Desperate for some way to remedy the situation, he started trying to think of what he could say to patch up this particular cluster. He didn't want to hurt her, just keep her from sealing that claim by accident, because he knew she wouldn't trust him again after that. And with something as permanent as a mating link, he wasn't about to take chances. He racked his brain for something to say. "Hey, babe, you might be tall, but you're still sexy as hell. I'm just not interested." But he was interested. Way too interested. He was so interested it had gotten painful to listen to her sleeping through a wall because he wanted to be in there, watching over her as she dreamed. Yeah, this was getting way, way too out of hand. And it was a damned good thing he'd warned her off. He just needed to step back and take a breather and cool his nuts on a goddamn block of ice and think about life for a while. A fourth-lander like that was not interested in a hairy little third-lander. But that startled little death-wishy part of his brain thought, she is interested. He'd smelled it on her, multiple times, and in a stupid, ballsy maneuver that still had his heart pounding, he'd just gotten confirmation. And then he'd utterly fucked it up and told her she was a Yeti. "Fuck," Jack muttered, slumping to the half-cut birch log. The woman of his dreams. And she was probably off bawling in her room, thinking he was about the worst asshole on the... Then Jack flinched. Bawling? He dropped the chainsaw and hurriedly jogged over to the closest basement window, listening. He couldn't hear her crying. But then again, would he be able to hear tears? He carefully eased himself inside of the house and snuck up to the edge of her brand new door, listening. He's just an asshole, Blaze was patiently explaining to herself. He doesn't think you're a Yeti. Then she paused, and Jack heard a huge, wrenching breath. Okay, so maybe he thinks you're a Yeti. Big deal. You've had, what, like 2 guys in your life? Babe, you know you're a Yeti, so what? It's not news. The only news here, Toots, is that he's completely not interested. But I am interested! Jack wanted to yell. So damn interested he was having trouble controlling himself around her. The beast in him wanted to dispense with the bullshit, claim her and rut all over her like a dog in heat. The man in him was desperately trying not to be totally turned on by the way she seemed utterly unafraid of him, by the sexy way she kept pissing him off on purpose, by the delicate clockwork brain that was always in motion behind those pretty blue eyes. I am interested, he thought again in misery. I just don't want you to end up a goddamn bloody corpse, okay? Listening to her rant to herself, Jack glanced down at his big, rough, greasy mechanic's hands and bit his lip. By running her off, he was protecting her, wasn't he? Living with him was dangerous. He was doing her a favor, keeping her out of the limelight, keeping her safe from being swept away by the alluring whirlwind of death that was Jack. And yet, he had insisted on moving in with her. A completely knee-jerk, oh my fuck, I'm not letting this thing out of my sight moment, the second he fully realized just what kind of beastie he had on his hands. So that argument kind of lost its merit now that he thought about it. Which meant he either needed to run her off for good, pack up and leave town, or dispense with the bullshit. Jack glanced down at the little pile of papers that he had dutifully filled with letters for her, and felt a wave of humiliation at his own failings. He might as well, he knew, take those papers and try to use them to get himself into Harvard. He didn't have a chance with her. He was a pauper that had found the Hope Diamond after it tumbled off somebody's crown, and he was doing his best to snatch it up and build a castle for it. She's so totally out of your league, he thought in misery, and she doesn't even know it yet. The moment she did figure it out, she was gone. She was gonna fly off into the sunset, baby. Because there were much better prospects out there than a hairy little asshole. She seemed rather infatuated with dragons, for instance. Or maybe she'd go head off north to check out Thunderbird. She didn't need him. And in that moment, he felt a growl start to rattle in his chest. Yes, she does, that death-wishy part of him retorted. And you sure as hell know that no dragon out there is going to waste his precious time or hoard building her a farm. And the idea of Thunderbird dirtying his hands, cleaning out engines, or getting sweaty hammering up a barn was completely laughable. You've got a chance at this, he realized, stunned. All you gotta do is stop screwing things up. Biting his lip, glancing back at the little sheaf of papers she'd left for him, Jack snuck back outside to begin unfucking his mistakes. Alrighty. ourselves a little locator right there. Perfect. Let's check in with everybody. Chapter 9, we got quite a cast here. All right. Let's head on over to the 80-minute mark. Set up a new chapter and let's say hello. And see who is watching. Hello, everyone. We're back. Oh, thank you. I Snibble, you have a good reading voice. And only checks in. Yeah, I check in about once every 30 or so minutes. But I do check in. I do check in. I hope you're all enjoying it. I'm so glad I found Sound Booth. Well, we are glad you found us. This is a lovely story. This is I'm having an absolute blast with this. Hopefully that will come through in the reading. Ken Angelotti. Hello, hi. Hello, Ken, how are you? Oh, a crab shows up. Yes! Sick. In the final production, the very talented Justin James shall be voicing a crab. I'm very excited for him. I'm enjoying performing this very much. I'm so glad you're enjoying the performance. Let's see. I just want to make absolutely sure I've got everybody. All right, cool. So we shall... I'm sorry? I'm sorry, Sarah, which was that? No, I'm saying a crab shows up in this chapter. Yeah. Very briefly, this is the Meet the Neighbors chapter, so he shows up. He makes a brief appearance. Yeah. So we're just getting to him, and then I know we have a lot of him later. We have his scenes with Kashifa coming up considerably later in the tale. Oh, yeah. Yes, I like him. He's fun. I mean, who wouldn't want to voice a genie? All right. Oh, yeah. That's fine. I'll probably just voice a lot of the incidentals and stuff then. But that is what that is. Okay. Oh yes, this will be fun. Alrighty, meet the neighbors.
Meet the neighbors. Here we go. Let me get my crop voice. He is down here, if I remember correctly. This will be him. I have a recording of his voice right here. Beautiful.
Obviously, I'm not gonna correct the mistake.
Perfect. Okay, cool. I did remember his voice correctly. Though for some reason, Reaper's having real trouble playing back those voice samples where I saved them. But that's okay. As long as Ableton's playing back fine, I'm good. Okay. And
here we go. Let's meet those neighbors. Chapter 9. Meet the neighbors. Blaze was still reading a book in an attempt to keep herself from crying an hour later when she heard Jack thump up onto the porch. Thump up onto the porch. Blaze was still reading a book in an attempt to keep herself from crying an hour later when she heard Jack thump up onto the porch and yank the door open. She heard him stop outside her door. I drew up some plans for the barn and the first greenhouse, he grumbled through the wall. Could use your help on a couple things. Blaze, who was still in her towel and bath gear, put the book down, tore the towel off of her head, and started getting dressed. Hey, Blaze? He asked, his voice sounding tentative. Blaze grabbed her huge man pants, yanked them on her huge man legs, jammed her huge man toes into her huge man socks, then rammed her Yeti feet into her man boots. She laced them up in silence. She heard him get out of the chair. You okay in there? He asked softly outside her door. With hard, rough brush strokes, she combed her hair, snapping off snarls rather than taking the time to comb them out. Bruce is gonna be here with the next load in an hour, Jack said. Blaze found her jacket and tugged it on, then grabbed her boonie cap off of the wall and cinched it down onto her head. She grabbed the bug dope and sprayed it until her tongue was numb and her nose stinging. Blaze? Jack asked again. Blaze went to the door and jerked it open. Jack looked up at her and took a surprised step back. Immediately, his nose scrunched in disgust. What, you use half a can of DEET in there? Blaze gave him a smile filled with teeth. In order to ensure that your Yeti doesn't board the flight back to town, your Yeti is going to go on a walk, Blaze said. Take care of the supplies when they get here. She made a dismissive, uncaring gesture toward the lodge. Or don't. Let Bruce pile them on the beach for all I care. Right now, I don't give a rat's shit what you do. You want to go get out the sandblaster and paint some buildings? That's fine. You want to go sit up in the prow and smoke pot and recount all the wonderful things you've done with your really long life? That works. You don't want to show up for work tomorrow? That would be good, too. She brushed past him and slammed the door of her room, leaving a stunned-looking Werverine standing in the hallway as she yanked the outer door open. Oh, Blaze said, looking back at him. And don't follow me. You do, and I'm on the next flight out with Bruce. I don't care what I have to do, I'm gone. She gave him a bitter smile. Not that you'd mind, seeing how you've got to share living space with a Yeti. Then she pushed through the door. At her back, she heard, I don't think you're... before she slammed the outer door shut behind her, busting loose the hasty repair job that Jack had given it. Blaze knew that it would seem rather suspicious if she didn't show to help unload when Bruce arrived with her first load of supplies, but she also knew that if she got anywhere near the plane, she would find herself on it when it took off. And she had put up with... She would find herself on it.
What? Whoa, okay, my headphones are going bad, I think. That's what it is.
She would find herself on it when it took off, and she had put up with too much of the Wereverine's horse shit to quit now. I'm going to hire someone else, Blaze thought, striding down the path toward the lake. I can't work with him. Though she had to admit he did a rather good job. Every worry she had, every unforeseen misfortune that had befallen the lodge in 4 years of abandonment, he had methodically been ironing out. He was competent. More competent in more things than anyone she had ever seen. And he was a complete heartless asshole. Thinking about his last quip still made her guts roil in humiliation. Blaze looked down at herself as she walked. Freakishly tall, flat-chested, feet the size of Bigfoot. Tears once again tried to sting at her eyes. She had to look away, had to focus on the trees along the edges of her path to keep them down. She would not cry. The last thing she wanted was to end up unconscious and helpless in the middle of bear territory. Shuddering, however, her mind kept getting dragged back to the same horrible thought. Jack thought she was a Yeti. Maybe her father's money would have been better spent on a boob job and a height reduction. She heard they were making girls taller in Russia, breaking the legs, stretching them out, letting them regrow, rinse and repeat. Why not shorter? Hell, that seemed easier anyway. Just cut out a bit of bone here, another bit there. One of the few men whom she had actually allowed herself to long for. A man who was so perfectly sculpted, even a 90-year-old nun would take notice, and he had looked her in the eye and called her an undesirable Yeti. She sucked in a breath and fought down a sob. The bastard. The callous, heartless bastard. Without any real goal in mind, Blaze reached the edge of the lake and started following the water's edge. Just walking. If she hadn't already sunk all of her inheritance into this place and indebted herself for another $250,000, she would have walked away already. She would have happily gone back to the city, plugged herself back into the grid, and forgotten about her farm. But the bastard had everything she owned sitting right there on his land, and she'd already spent a good $50,000 in lumber, barging, fuel, and supplies. The animals were going to drive that to $75, easy. That left $175 to keep herself and her employee, whoever that ended up being, alive, while they bought more lumber, built cabins, sank septic systems, drilled wells, secured advertising, and hired guides. She should have waited. Blaze bit her lip against another thread of tears. She would not cry, damn it. Jack could go fuck himself. Still, she knew she should have gained a few years of experience working in someone else's business, managing someone else's staff, squirreling away someone else's salary, getting ready. Seeing her father's check, she'd gotten excited and jumped in too soon. And she was going to lose everything because of it. No, her mind growled. You haven't lost anything. Just tell the arrogant fucker to leave. It's your property, you paid for it. He doesn't like it, you can call the state troopers and clue them in on this cranky little asshole that's squatting on state land. That made her feel minimally better, but not by much. At most, she could make the Wereverine pack up and leave. She certainly doubted that the Alaska state troopers had the means necessary to put him in a cell, if he didn't want to be there. And further, she was pretty sure that if she ousted him, he would make his displeasure known by doing something horrible before he left. Like, say, running the dozer through the basement, or leaving the chainsaw buried in the generator. Or he could simply kill you, a disgusted portion of her brain thought. Twist your head off and shove it in the wood stove. Bury the body with the dozer. Go back to being an asshole in the woods. Blaze trudged along the lake bed, then continued out the same channel she had seen Bruce and... Hold on, I think my headphone plug is coming loose or something. I'm gonna go check that real quick, because I can't hear my playback when I need to re-record. I will be right back. The glamorous parts of the voice acting profession, equipment maintenance.
There we go. Okay, it was just a loose plug. I don't even know how that got kicked loose. I haven't moved that interface in weeks. Then continued out the same channel she had seen Bruce and Lance putter out to on floats. Here, the water lightened to a greenish hue and moved at a couple feet a minute. Blaze ducked under a fallen spruce and kept going. The time had come, Blaze decided, to start taking control of the situation. She'd poured everything she had into this place, and the fact that her handyman had turned out to have special attributes shouldn't stop her from living her dream. Thinking about it, she doubted she could make him leave. And when she considered that option, she was pretty sure she didn't want him to leave. At least, not until he taught her what he knew about the operation of a fishing lodge. She wasn't, however, going to entertain any more stupid fantasies. They had a business arrangement, and that was all. She was going to take up residence in the top-floor owner's apartment. He was going to stay in the basement. She wouldn't eat meals with him, wouldn't talk with him any more than necessary to get the lodge up and running, and would only continue her rudimentary reading lessons if it meant he would continue to make himself obsolete by teaching her how to take care of the place herself. Something like an hour and a half later, she was standing on the banks of the Yentna River, watching as Bruce Rogers idled out through the mouth of Ebony Creek and into the swift gray waters of the Yentna. As she watched, he gunned the big engine and got the large plane up to speed. It was a de Havilland Beaver, he had informed her on one of his many previous trips, able to carry 6 times the load than the Cessna 206 his brother had used to drop her off, and almost twice as expensive at $600 an hour. As she watched, Bruce lifted the blocky nose and sailed into the air. Blaze felt a twinge of regret seeing him go. She glanced at the shore back the way she had come. She had scheduled 2 or 3 more such beaver trips to take the lake. I screwed up the emphasis again. She glanced at the shore back the way she had come. There we go. Lost my place again. Where am I? There it is. She had scheduled 2 or 3 more such beaver trips to the lake that day, depending on how much they could fit in each load. Either way, if she hurried, Blaze was pretty sure she could make it back to the lake before Bruce used up the $4,000 she had allotted him for the deliveries. She could still get out of here. She turned her back on the urge, and instead stared down the Yentna. The river was abnormally low, she had been told, which was why she wasn't having the barge run now with an 18,000-pound cargo capacity at 25 cents a pound, and was instead hiring a $600 an hour airplane with a max load of a couple thousand pounds, about half of which would be used up on lighter things like towels and toilet paper to deliver 3 loads of construction supplies, food, and other necessities. Among the many disturbing revelations that Blaze had stumbled upon since May was the fact that Jack ate a lot. He'd worked his way through what should have lasted her all summer in the space of 2 weeks, and she was pretty sure that he was still hunting on the side. Blaze had been walking for another hour and a half before she heard the second flight take off, far upriver and around the bend. She watched as Bruce Rogers glided overhead, gaining altitude, and again felt that pang of regret. I'm not giving up, Blaze thought stubbornly. That short, crass little jackass isn't going to make me give up my lodge. I just need to cool off. Now and again, in the patches of silty gray sand interspersed throughout the gravelly riverbed beneath her feet, Blaze saw signs of life. Usually tiny, like bird or squirrel or even mouse, she nonetheless found a couple large moose tracks here and there, often with smaller prints accompanying them. That made Blaze smile. At one time, there had been only 200 moose along the entire Yentna River. The moose population of the area had almost been driven to extinction by a black bear boom 20 years ago, and for 10 years, Fish and Game had allowed subsistence moose hunts only, and had instigated, not instigated.
and had instigated... There we are, okay. And had instigated a heavy predator control program to try and reverse the decline. For the first time in 20 years, there were about 2,000 moose feeding in the lakes and swamps along the river system between the Brooks Range and the Cook Inlet, and that number was climbing slowly. Fish and Game was still well below the 6,000 to 8,000 they required before they canceled the predator control measures that they had originally planned to only keep in effect for 3 or 4 years. And now Alaska was facing an upheaval in the political scene as to who was to blame and why. Prey numbers all over the state had been dropping precipitously, especially the caribou herds north of the Brooks Range, and no one could seem to pinpoint the cause. The current head of the Department of Fish and Game had quietly resigned over the predator control controversy, and until today, Blaze had looked at the whole hoopla as a ploy by the media to sell more papers. Now, Blaze looked at the situation in a new light. Werewolves, werebears, dragons, and an ornery little werverine. She wondered just how much food those creatures had to eat, and where they were getting it. She couldn't imagine that Jack was upkeeping his chiseled body on eggs and sandwiches alone, and the energy to transform into that slitty-eyed beast had to come from somewhere. And, judging by the way he decimated her food stores, requiring several more deliveries of groceries than she had been anticipating, he was more than a little desperate for sustenance. She actually wondered several times if he had been starving before she showed up. Of course, she wouldn't mention it. Of course, she couldn't mention it. Not without getting that furry, hackles-up scowl and, "I don't need your money, sister." Right. He was only eating her out of house and home to make her feel better. Then she remembered what Jack had said about killing new wares, and how there were too many of them already. Suddenly, her farm began to take on a whole new potential. For years, she had been worried about the red tape involved with raising and selling livestock and dairy products in the United States. The equipment and process involved for legal sale of a farm's goods were prohibitive, to say the least. Between the inspections, the fees, the codes, the structures, the facilities, and the fines for non-compliance, Blaze hadn't really considered large-scale production an option. But if she could quietly establish contact with her nearby neighbors and set up a system of trade for a cow here, a few pigs there, then she could bypass the need to clean and butcher entirely, thereby foregoing the need for a USDA-inspected slaughterhouse. She even wondered if she could make a contact to the north, and maybe shuttle cattle north of the Brooks Range. Or have them come to her. The thought of meeting a dragon left Blaze with a flutter in her stomach. She'd always enjoyed reading stories about dragons as a kid, would snatch them off of the bookstore shelves just because they had a dragon on the cover. The idea that they were real, and that she may someday meet one, left her feeling a mixture of excitement and anticipation. She could imagine the monstrous creatures landing in her yard at night to feed, and then trying to explain to the neighbors why 5 of her cows had gone missing sometime after dusk. Blaze was still smiling about that thought when she heard the whine of a boat motor. Pausing, she glanced up. A flat-bottomed riverboat was coming north up the Yentna River toward her. Once it got close enough to make out the shapes against the glare of the gray glacier water, Blaze saw that it contained 2 women, one sitting in the back to run the jet, while the other huddled near the front against the wind. Not really in any mood to talk, Blaze had hoped that they wouldn't see her and would motor on by. As it grew closer, however, the boat started to veer to the right, toward Blaze's beach, and her stomach grew tight with a lump of dread. The last thing she wanted to do was explain to her neighbors why she was out wandering the river without so much as a backpack.
I need water, because my throat is mad at me. It is very angry with me right now.
Apparently my inner monologue is a crowd today, because this is his voice when he comes up.
Let's see how everyone's doing. Oh.
Thank you, Sarah. I will happily read your books anytime. You read so well, I get lost in the imagery. Well, thank you, Terry. I need to reposition my monitor so that I don't disappear off camera every time I read the comments, but I haven't been able to work out a, jury rig some sort of solution yet. Eventually, though. Eventually, I will make eye contact with you all at all times, rather than just when I'm reading. But that's alright, because, my camera's here, my computer is down where I look, and I don't have my glasses on, and I am, literally all I can read is the iPad in front of me. I can't even read the comments from here, and my monitor's maybe 2 feet away from me. It's bad. I am, very nearsighted. Okay. So I need Amber and Kimber, and then all of the man-slurring speech, all of the miscellaneous one-offs. And then I need a crab. A crab will make his first appearance in this book. Perfect. Okay. Beautiful. All right. This will put us in a good spot. Work with him. Blah. Okay, we're back. Get me back to where we are. Okay. Oh, thank you. Well, the funny thing is, if I get my glasses, so I can read the comments, and I guess I could just take them off. But it's actually harder for me to read the iPad if I have my glasses on. But yes, you are... I suppose I could do the simple solution of putting them on to read the comments. That's, why do that when I can make my life complicated? Well, I would love to have a sound booth at my house, but my voice isn't that good to need one. Well, you don't have to get something like this to build a sound booth. My first sound booth was PVC pipe and moving blanket, and it actually sounded pretty okay. I was booking jobs with that. And then eventually I changed the blankets to specifically sound-treated blankets, but you'd be surprised what you can build a really good sounding booth out of. All right. Yeah, I built it myself. Just went to Home Depot, cut some pipe up, bought a bunch of 99-cent clamps, and that was it. That was my first rig. All right, here we go. Amber, here we come. Hello. Oh. Hello there, the lean woman in the back of the boat called. Oh, wait, no. That needs to be louder. That needs to be real loud because she's yelling over a prop. Oh, damn it. Now it's recording in the wrong spot. Never thought saying hi would be such a comedy of errors for me, but there y'all go. I hope you're all entertained. Jesus. Okay. Hello there, the lean woman in the back of the boat called over the roar of the prop. She was probably about 5'10", and even under her bundle of heavy jackets and flotation device, Blaze could tell that her body was the slender, hourglass-shaped figure that she had always wanted. Her eyes were blue, almost white, and she had long blonde hair that was even then loose in the wind. Hey, Blaze said, smiling and bracing herself for a conversation she didn't want. Why are you out walking the river? The blonde woman asked as the aluminum hull of the boat scraped the shore near Blaze's feet and she shut off the engine. Boat breakdown? Need a lift? Taking up a seat in the bow, her companion was a tiny, brown-eyed, black-haired mouse of a woman who seemed to be hiding within her life jacket, probably only 5 feet max. She was cringing backwards in her seat, her dark eyes fixed on Blaze's face in horror. When Blaze stepped forward to offer the woman her hand, she just slid further away, looking like Blaze had approached her with a bloody hatchet. The walking she-mountain strikes again, Blaze thought, disgusted at the fear she inspired in the timid woman. Fighting down another rush of self-loathing, she returned her attention to the blonde woman and her question. "Wanted to look around," Blaze lied. "We don't have the boats in the water yet." The driver's delicately arched eyebrow, nothing like the thick orange masses on Blaze's forehead, went up. "You're new in the area, then?" "Yeah," Blaze said. "I'm Blaze Mackenzie, bought the Sleeping Lady Lodge from the Myers." "Oh!" the woman cried, sounding delighted. She tilted the engine and got up. "I'm Amber Stern, and this is Kimber Womack." She gestured to the child-sized bundle. When both Blaze and Amber's attention turned on her, Kimber raised a tentative hand and gave a soft hello in a voice that sounded almost Arabic. Combined with the woman's dark skin, her jet-black hair, and her tiny size, Blaze guessed she was probably a military wife, brought over when one of the GIs from Elmendorf or Fort Richardson came back from a deployment. Like a lot of women when they hit American soil and started having to repeat their name to fat-tongued Americans, she had probably changed her name to something more pronounceable by her new Yankee neighbors. "So, where you from?" Amber asked as she climbed out of the boat. Blaze moved to help the woman drag the vessel up the shore, but Amber had the prow resting on 6 feet of gravel before she could lend a hand. Blaze found herself impressed. For such a small woman, she was strong. "Alaska," Blaze said. "First time in the bush, though. Kinda jumped between Wasilla and Anchorage my whole life." Amber smiled, her blue eyes flashing amusedly. Almost in the patronizing tone one would use on a child, she said, "That my throat hates me and I need more water. Jesus." Dang, want to come build me one? I mean, it was kind of a fun project, not gonna lie. I got to use a hacksaw and everything. What mic do? Sin's Corner. Oh, hey, Sin. What mic do I use? I use a Telefunken TF-47. I started, a Telefunken TF-47. And I like it. It's my first tube mic. Oh. Good Lord. My larynx is not happy with me right now. I don't even know if it's that. I feel like I just inhaled dust or something. Oh, man. All right. Oh, yes, and cool, thanks. I'm obsessed with researching mics at the moment. Oh, yes, and anytime. I love talking microphones. They're so much fun. Yeah, this one is probably by far my favorite mic that I have. It's just, I don't know. I just like the way it looks. Like, the first time I pulled it out of the box, I was just like, this thing is so cool. Bye, Sin. Have fun. Have fun audio proofing. Sin is one of Soundbooth Theater's proofers, and she is excellent at her job. I worked with her on my first project, ever with them, actually. Okay, let me double check something. Just make sure I don't have any special notes for Amber that I wrote down, because I don't want to mess that up. I don't want to mess that up. There we go. I don't believe I do. Perfect, okay. Alrighty.
back to saying it now that my own throat is not... Back to saying words now that my own throat is not trying to choke me to death. Here we go. The Yentin is a big leap from Anchorage. Why'd you move? Yet another bush rat who thinks I'm a useless city slicker. Bristling, Blaze shrugged. Had some money come in. Thought I might try getting away from it all. Amber's smile was still pleasant, but her ice-blue eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Imperceptibly. I always do that. I always say imperceptibly. Her eyes narrowed, but she wasn't perceptive at all. All right. Anyway. Amber's smile was still pleasant, but her ice-blue eyes narrowed, almost imperceptibly. What kind of money? Inheritance, Blaze said, trying not to show just how rude she felt the woman's questions were. She thought the woman's attention sharpened. How much? How much? Blaze couldn't believe someone would have the audacity to ask. Then again, considering her experiences with Jack, she wouldn't be surprised if the people in the bush were a little less up-to-date on their people skills. It was enough, Blaze said, shrugging against the odd sensation of the woman's complete attention. Bought the sleeping lady outright, now I've got Jack Thornton helping me fix it up. The woman's face darkened to a thunderhead. Jack Thornton. The way she said it, Blaze might as well have said that she had hired an undead intestinal parasite. Blaze raised a brow, her curiosity getting the better of her. You know him? Who doesn't? Amber snapped, and even the girl in the boat seemed to cringe. He's the crankiest, most selfish asshole on the river. The world would be a better place if someone shoved a chainsaw up his ass and pulled the cord. The way Amber's lip twitched in a snarl, it was evident that she had personal experience with the bastard. Blaze was grinning, despite herself. I was beginning to think the same thing myself. What did he do to you? Amber was scowling upriver, her shoulders hunched in obvious fury. The petite woman on the boat reached out and touched a tiny hand to Amber's leg. Amber's face seemed to clear immediately, and she looked at Blaze with a smile. Oh, nothing a rabid lobotomized ape with anger issues wouldn't have done in his place. She glanced at the boat, then raised an eyebrow at Blaze. You want to go back to our place and talk about it? Blaze hesitated, glancing at the river behind her. She had told Jack she was just going on a walk. Then she froze, thinking of something new. You guys got a phone? Amber grinned. Sure, why? I need to make a call, Blaze said. Get myself a new cell phone and a new Colt 45 shipped out here. Amber raised a brow. Oh, Amber raised a brow in the wrong track is what she did. She should be raising the brow up in the narration track. There we go. The accent of my internal dialogue is all over the place today. It's quite funny. Amber raised a brow. Oh? Yeah, Blaze said. Bastard broke 'em both. Amber seemed to stiffen a bit. He broke a revolver? She gave Blaze a narrow look. He must be really strong. Or stupid and pig-headed, Blaze said smoothly, realizing her mistake. Told me I didn't need him. He's got enough tools in the place that I'm pretty sure he could take apart a nuclear warhead if he had the inclination. Amber seemed to relax. He took it apart. She seemed to shake herself and gestured towards the boat. Come on in. There's a life vest under the prow, and... Kimber's hand on Amber's leg again stopped the woman. The petite woman was still staring up at Blaze, wide-eyed. Kimber gave a slight shake of her head and bit her lip.
Amber threw her hand off of her with a snarl that both startled Blaze in its viciousness and made the woman climb behind the seat, quaking. "She's coming." Glancing at Blaze, she smiled. "She's had to deal with Jack these last few weeks. I'm sure she could use the company." Made uncomfortable by the display, Blaze uneasily tried to piece together the relationship between the two women. The smaller woman was quite obviously terrified, and Amber seemed to think absolutely nothing of it. Amber's smile cracked when Blaze didn't get in the boat. "Don't mind Kimber," she said sweetly, looking back at her companion. "She's a little—" She cocked her head, almost thoughtful. "Off?" Returning her attention to Blaze, Amber smiled and said, "She's sheltered. Raised in Squentna, never left the bush." Raised in Squentna? Blaze thought, thinking of the woman's Arabic features and voice. Then, shrugging, Amber added, "Probably never seen a woman over 6 foot in her life." Blaze flushed and dropped her gaze. Amber's interest seemed to sharpen. "Get in the boat," she said. Blaze jerked her head up, frowning. That had almost seemed like a command. Amber gestured at the vessel, waiting. Now that Blaze was looking closer, the pupils of her eyes seemed to be slightly misshapen. When Blaze didn't move forward, Amber's eyes narrowed. She lifted her head slightly, took in a deep breath through her nose that reminded her of Jack's flared nostrils whenever he caught a new scent on the breeze. Delicately, she unzipped her life jacket and set it aside. Every instinct in Blaze's body was suddenly humming, telling her to... Every instinct in Blaze's body was suddenly humming, telling her to back away from the pretty blonde and run as fast and as hard through the forest as she could go. "Now," Amber said, as her pupils lengthened into slits. She smiled, and Blaze saw long, ivory fangs emerge from beneath her lips. "We're gonna have a little fun with this newest toy." Oh, I put it in the wrong track again. Chick 2. "Now," Amber said, as her pupils lengthened into slits. She smiled, and Blaze saw long, ivory fangs emerge from beneath her lips. "We're gonna have a little fun with his newest toy." Blaze's heart was hammering now. She took a step backwards, though, after seeing Jack's speed. She knew that wouldn't save her. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh," Amber laughed. "I can smell his musk all over you. He's shifted in your presence, and you've put the little shit into a rutting mood." She took another deep breath. Nostrils flared, sniffing the air between them. Her smile widened, and her face was elongating in the shape of a canine's skull, her ears stretching and growing silvery white fur. "Tell me I'm wrong." Blaze took another step backwards, arcs of adrenaline biting through her veins. "I hate the son of a bitch," she managed. "That's not what your body is telling me." The woman hunched as her body grew, the hump of her shoulders rising above Blaze's head. Long white fur was sprouting from every square inch of the woman's body, and her lips and eyelids were darkening to an ebony black. She smiled, and as Blaze watched, the extra rows of teeth punched through the roof of her mouth, leaving strands of bloody saliva dribbling from her jaw. "The body can't hide its own musk, girl. Now get in the boat." Blaze eyed the boat, saw the ebony black wolf standing beside Kimber's life jacket like a very large, very muscular dog, and she bolted. Blaze didn't even make the edge of the riverbank before pain ripped through her back, and something heavy dragged her to the ground. She screamed and tried to kick away, but a leaden, clawed fist slammed into the side of her face, stunning her. Dazed, unable to put up much resistance, Blaze groaned as she felt rough hands grab her wrists and drag them behind her back. "Get the anchor line!" Amber snapped over her shoulder. Then, to Blaze, her hot breath licking the back of Blaze's neck, she said, "We're gonna enjoy ourselves, taming Thornton's newest bitch." Vaguely, Blaze felt the woman loop the rope. I don't know what a rope is, but that's what my brain decided rope was. God dang it, brain. Blaze felt the woman loop the rope around her wrists and pull it tight. Unlike Jack, however, Amber didn't make any attempt to be humane. She twisted the ropes until they were cutting off circulation to her hands, then yanked Blaze's ankles back and wrapped the line around them as well. Wrong emphasis, Sacky boy. Then yanked Blaze's ankles back and wrapped the line around them as well. She took a second piece of rope, and after stuffing a greasy, gas-smelling engine rag into Blaze's mouth, cinched it tight around her head. Blaze was just starting to regain some of her senses when she felt herself hefted off the ground, then thrown into the boat, heedless of whatever got in her way. Blaze, unable to protect her face, felt her world explode in a burst of agony as her head hit the far side of the boat and something in her nose snapped. She gagged on the rag as blood started running down her face in rivulets, dripping on the boot-scuffed aluminum. As she passed to return to her seat at the back of the boat, Amber shoved her aside with a foot until her face was mashed against the back bench seat, her knees crammed against the forward bench, wedged between the two with a painful angle to her neck. Then Amber threw a couple spare life jackets over Blaze's prone body and started the back engine while Kimber pushed them off the beach. The brutal treatment left a growing well of fear rising within Blaze's gut. They don't care if I live, she realized, as she felt warm blood start dribbling down her ribs from the wound in her back, which meant they didn't plan on leaving her alive. She remembered Jack's last girlfriend, the werverine that had disappeared, leaving only body parts behind. Suddenly it made too much sense. The boat trip seemed to take hours, but in reality was probably only about 20 minutes. Neither of her captors spoke, and for Blaze, with her busted nose grinding hard against the low metal seat, it was doing everything she could just to stay conscious. When the motor finally slowed and the boat jolted as its hull slid up a sandy bank, Blaze was starting to feel dizzy. The blood dribbling down her ribs had slowed, but the bottom line of the boat was crimson underneath her. "Go get the pack," Blaze heard Amber growl. "Tell them to dig her a hole. I want this bitch underground before he realizes she's gone. They're going to bury me." Her panic rising, Blaze made weak struggles against her bonds. Behind the bench, Blaze heard Amber begin to bail out the bloody rainwater from the bottom of the boat. A moment later, Amber paused. Her voice was low and dangerous when she said, "I told you to go get the pack." Kimber's voice was a timid whisper when she said, "Amber, I think we should let her go. When I look at her, she's wreathed in—" The bolt jolted as Amber leaped its length. A moment later, Blaze heard the sound of choking. "Did I ask for your opinion?" Amber sneered. "No," Kimber whimpered. "Then go," Amber snarled. Blaze heard the sound of something heavy hit the sand. "Do as I told you. Next time, I won't waste my time leaving your head attached." "Sorry, mistress," Kimber whined. "So sorry." Then there was the sound of running feet, and Blaze was alone with the werewolf. "So," Amber said. Blaze felt the boat rock as she stepped back into it with her. "I'm sure you're wondering by now what you did to deserve to be buried alive." She stepped over the front seat, then squatted beside Blaze, her ice-blue eyes cold. "Well, nothing, really," she smiled. "Except maybe have really bad choice in men." Amber reached out, wiped a dribble of blood from Blaze's lip, brought it to her mouth and tasted it. Smiling over her finger, Amber said, "See, the Werverine killed my mate, and 6 of my best friends. Every once in a while I gotta remind him why weasels don't play with wolves." She reached out and patted Blaze on the head, then got up and started bailing the boat once more. She's going to bury me alive, Blaze thought, the idea taking a clammy hold in her gut. A few minutes later, several heavy footsteps came running. Blaze, crammed as she was between the benches, couldn't raise her head to see who had approached. "You get the cage dug up?" Amber demanded. "It was right where we left it, mistress."
Oh, I put that in the chick voice track by mistake. That's not where that goes. Bloody hell, that goes here.
"Was right where we left it, mistress." "Was right where we left it, mistress." A deep male voice, low and submissive. "Then throw the blanket over her and take her to the pit," Amber said. "I'll be along in a bit to see her off." Then there were big bodies moving in the boat beside her, lifting Blaze off the ground, carrying her from the boat, shielded from the rest of the world by a tattered old quilt. Hanging from her shoulders and ankles, shrouded by a blanket, Blaze could only see the thin dirt track in the forest floor as it passed beneath her. After a few hundred paces, the forest floor became littered with loose dirt, and they dropped her suddenly amidst the soil-strewn bushes. Blaze, her sight completely cut off when the blanket fell around her, thrashed to get it off of her head. A heavy boot slammed into her ribs, and suddenly it was all Blaze could do to breathe, each gasping lungful of air lancing jagged spikes of pain through her spine. She felt movement around her, and heard voices. "That's a girl?" a man asked, sounding incredulous. "Why'd she pick that thing up?" A toe nudged Blaze through the blanket. "She got away, what, a couple 100 pounds?" "Boss said she's a rich brat," another replied. Blaze could hear the shrug in his voice when he said, "Got some sort of inheritance." "And she's been fucking Jack Thornton," a third voice. "And she's been fucking Jack Thornton," a third voice, female, piped in. "Inheritance, huh?" the first voice mused. A third male voice snorted. "What'd you think? A figure like that? Amber sure as hell ain't going for the sex appeal." Blaze lowered her face to the ground and squeezed her eyes shut against the humiliation. Even before it killed her, life was going to serve her one last dish of shame, for old time's sake. A few yards away, she heard what sounded like something heavy and metal being dragged through the dirt, but with the blanket covering her head, she couldn't identify it. The commotion seemed to build around her, with more and more people showing up and adding their opinions to the conversation. The general consensus was that Blaze was definitely an eyesore, but Jack needed a wake-up call and the pack could use the extra money. "I'm not rich!" Blaze wanted to scream. She had the Sleeping Lady Lodge, and that was it. She'd been able to secure a $250,000 loan with her lodge as collateral, using every last ounce of her ounce, not ounce. Using every last ounce of her knowledge as a business major to convince the loan officer to sign on the dotted line. She was going to have to pay back $350,000 by the time she'd paid off interest. But they weren't taking the gas-soaked rag out of her mouth. And every time Blaze grunted or moved, she got kicked for the effort. "I'm not rich," she thought in misery. "I'm not." Why they thought they could somehow access her accounts by making her disappear, she didn't understand. She hadn't brought out plane loads of cash, or buried 1,000 pounds of gold bullion in the basement. She had nothing but a few hundred under her pillow, a couple debit cards, a credit card, and the deed to the sleeping lady. If they would only take the gag out and let her talk to them, she could explain the situation. But they continued to talk around her as if she didn't even exist. By the number of voices, Blaze estimated 20, maybe even 30. This is where all the moose have been going, Blaze thought ridiculously. Human hunters were issued a permit for a single bull moose a year. Werewolves, especially werewolves who were willing to kidnap a woman and bury her alive, probably weren't going to bother applying for permits. They probably also weren't going to be selective on how old the moose was, or whether they brought down a bull or a cow. They were like a cancer, Blaze thought, listening to more arrive. At least 30 now. The dozens of voices around her were beginning to reach a roar. If what Jack had told her could be believed, 6 years ago, there had only been a few werewolves left. Now she would have been surprised if there weren't 40 of them gathered around her. Maybe they're not all werewolves, Blaze thought hopefully. Maybe the rest are just groupies. She doesn't smell rich. She doesn't smell rich.
She doesn't smell rich.
Oh wait, I need that to be deeper and huskier. More depth, more husk.
She doesn't smell rich. It was a deep, husky voice very near her head. She heard the sound of a match, then the acrid tang of cigar smoke swept under the blanket, powerful even through the smell of her own blood. She heard puffs, then choked as a cloud of smoke drifted under the opening between the quilt and the ground, directed there by whoever was squatting beside her. The same voice says, "She smells like that rat fuck who killed Raoul." Whoever he was stood up and walked off. As the talking grew louder and even more began to show up, even through the blanket, Blaze began to smell alcohol. "Hey, you're off me!" A woman's voice, native, slurred, somewhere to Blaze's right. "Come on, baby," a man said, his voice also slurred. "It won't kill you to put out once in a while." Blaze heard what sounded like a sack of potatoes slamming into a tree, followed by a snarl. A drunken brawl followed, and she flinched as it neared her head. "Come on, you idiots!" the deep, husky voice of the cigar smoker growled. "Knock it off, for I rip off your damn heads!" That seemed to settle them a bit. The crowd, however, had just gotten started. Conversation peaked, and it seemed like Blaze had been dropped in the middle of a cocktail party, not in the dirt and mosquitoes of the Alaskan bush. Finally, she heard the crowd go silent, and instinctively knew that the approaching footsteps on the trail behind her belonged to Amber. "So," Amber said, coming to a stop beside Blaze, "I see everybody's arrived." "Except Derek and Megan," someone piped. "Someone couldn't get the druggy bastards out of bed." Amber sighed. "I thought I told you fools to stop feeding them. If they can't stop using, then we got no use for them." "We did," another woman complained. "Derek went out last night, dragged back half a moose calf and fed it to her." Amber made a disgusted sound. "Tell those two if they don't get clean, they're going in the cage with the werverine." There was raucous laughter at that, and Blaze's attention sharpened. The werverine? Then Jack's girlfriend was still alive. Amber jerked the blanket from Blaze's body and smiled down at her, looking amused. "So, my very large heiress, perhaps you're still wondering why we're going to bury you alive." But Blaze's eyes had already locked on to the squat metal cage sitting at the top of an incline leading down into a gaping dirt hole. The cage was about 5 feet square in any direction, and looked to be built of something resembling welded railroad track. That's a good vocal warm-up phrase. Welded railroad track. There we go.
The cage was about 5 feet square in any direction.
And looked to be built of something resembling welded railroad track. It's because, Amber said, squatting down beside her, we don't want you to do anything stupid after we've welcomed you into the family. As she spoke, the werewolf's face lengthened, her teeth growing longer and more predatory. Her blue eyes became slitted, her body growing the silvery white fur. All around them, men and women whooped and hollered, and then, as Blaze watched in horror, they too began to change. All of them. At least 40. While Amber only went halfway, staying in a semi-human form, the rest shifted completely into huge, four-legged wolves of every size and color, all of them staring at her. All of them waiting. The only one who didn't was a hulking black man who was leaning against a tree, at least 7 feet tall, his violet eyes watching her with commiseration. Violet eyes? Then Blaze blinked, remembering what the woman had said. Welcome me into the family? Her startled mind thought. Then, she saw Amber's extra rows of teeth as they pushed through the roof and floor of her mouth, making blood well up against the woman's tongue and spill over her gum line. Oh my...
Oh, I need to scream into the gag.
Trick of the trade coming up right here. Oh my God! Blaze tried to scream.
Oh, damn it. Damn it, Ableton. You left a little bit of a thing.
Now I gotta do that again. Oh my God! Blaze tried to scream into the gag. She struggled, yanking at her bound hands as hard as she could. You have no right to do that, pup, the big black man interrupted, his voice coming from over Amber's shoulder. He had closed the distance and had put his hand on Amber's shoulder. A crab? Shush! The little black wolf snapped.
Oh, wait, that's Kimber, that's not Amber.
A crab! Shush! The little black
wolf. Okay.
The little black wolf snapped. But Mondib, she's a... Control your slave, Kimber. Amber growled without even looking up. Her slitted eyes were fixed on Blaze, bloody saliva dribbling from her open jaws. I am a sheik's son, you postulant camel penis. Do you want to meet with the shadow again, Akrab? The tiny black wolf demanded. They break the pact, the huge black man snarled. That doesn't bother you, Justicar. Open your mouth again, Flamekin, the little black wolf retorted, and you will be choking on darkness. Towering above them, the black man looked like he would say more. Then his violet eyes met Blaze's, and she saw a twist of misery before he looked away. Without another word, he walked off to lean against a tree and cross his arms defiantly over his chest, watching the scene from afar. And when Blaze desperately scanned the faces of the monstrous wolves gathering around her, no one in the... No one else in the group seemed willing to help her. Squatting beside her, Amber was grinning, enjoying Blaze's terror, her long ivory teeth glistening with mingled saliva and blood. All right, then. Seeing how there are no other objections, here we go. Struggle all you want, big girl. It'll only make the magic work faster. And then, like she was easing into a lover's embrace, she leaned forward and clamped her big jaws down on Blaze's shoulder. Blaze screamed as 100 needle-like teeth punctured the skin and muscle of her chest and back, then felt an odd rush as something raced outward from the wound, spreading in an icy, searing wave through her body. Suddenly, her heart was a thundering mass of fire, each vein a pounding coal, each capillary an individual inferno, as hot and cold streaks started warring in her chest. Blaze gasped, sucking in a chestful of gasoline-choked air, then emptied her lungs into the gag as the fires spread throughout her body, blazing through her blood and bones in angry surges. It felt like she'd been thrown into a vat of liquid nitrogen, dunked in diesel fuel, and lit on fire. Blaze screamed again, this time because her skin felt as if it were burning away, leaving bones and dust in its place. Somewhere in the group of wolves, a small black one started backing away from the group. When Amber yanked her jaws from Blaze's shoulder and pulled away, smiling, there was an odd silver luminescence to the werewolf's inner teeth, mingling with the blood, dripping down her jaw to glow in red-streaked silvery puddles on the forest below. "There," Amber said, patting her wound. "Welcome to the family." All around her, wolves began to howl. Blaze shuddered and lowered her head to the ground, every beat of her heart a fiery blast of anguish. She felt her heart stutter, try to fail. Something kicked it back into gear, but then it stopped again, this time for good. For several long seconds, Blaze had the distinctly unreal feeling of stillness within her chest. "Her heart stopped," the Italian-looking man with the cigar said, frowning. Amber scowled and slammed a fist into Blaze's spine. Why would her heart stop? The sudden jolt made the lump of fire within her chest shudder and thump again. The werewolf hit her again, harder, and Blaze began to feel dizzy as her heart staggered and thudded. "You think he already claimed her?" the man asked. Oh wait, that needs to be huskier. "You think he already claimed her?" No, I need to do Italian. You think he already claimed her? You think he already claimed her? The man asked, grinding his cigar out on the trunk of a birch tree. He came over to squat beside them. "She's only been out here a couple months," Amber growled. "And he's got those fucking standards of his." "Maybe she's already aware," the Italian man asked. He held his half-burned cigar in one hand and was lowering a big palm to Blaze's forehead with the other. Blaze's vision was going hazy, her lump of coals dying in her chest. "She didn't shift when we caught her." From the group of wolves, the little black one whined, "Please put her in the cage, Amber. Please!" "I don't want the rich bitch to die on me," Amber snapped. "That's the least of your concerns now, Demon Kin." Yes, Mundi, that's the least of your concerns. "That's the least of your concerns now, Demon Kin," the black man laughed. He had stepped away from his tree, towering over all the wolves in the area. Even through Blaze's stupor, she knew his laugh was filled with bitterness. "Next time, listen to my mistress when she tries to tell you something, puppy." "A crop!" the tiny black wolf hissed, even as Amber stood up and roared, teeth and talons bared. "This is my pack! I turned them, asshole! They answer to me! You try to start giving orders around here, slave, you're gonna end up in the hole with the werverine. Same for you, Kimber." The huge black man narrowed his purple eyes. "It may be your pack, but it will crumble to dust before I see my next decade." Turning his big back to her, he turned to stalk away. Over his back, he called, "Mondib, when you fools are done with this stupidity, I'll be wandering the dunes." Then he vanished completely. Blaze didn't have time to think on that, though. Her heart had been utterly still for an entire minute. "What's wrong with you?" Amber snapped, slamming her fist back into Blaze's spine again. Blaze felt more ribs snap under the abuse. "You already been claimed by the magic? Girl!" Blaze's heart stumbled back into gear, and she found her vision going fuzzy around the edges. Her chest was aching with the searing flow of molten metal with each combustive blast of her core. She vomited into the gag. She vomited into the gag, then struggled to swallow it back down so she could breathe. She nonetheless saw silver dribble from around the rag, onto the ground beneath her head. "What's wrong with her?" one of the werewolves asked. She had shifted back to a human state, apparently unable to hold the half-state that Amber and Jack seemed to acquire so easily. "Huh," Amber said, dragging a talon through the blood seeping through Blaze's punctured shirt. Peering at the silver-red mixture, she said, "Weird reaction." "Looks like she's spitting out the magic," another suggested. "Maybe she's part Fae," another said. Amber poked Blaze in the side. "You part Fae, girl?" Blaze groaned and tried not to feel the way the fire was arcing through her body with every beat of her heart. "If you're Fae, you better tell us. Moon magic'll kill an Earthbound." Blaze's heart was still pounding, but she felt like she was panting out scorching gas with every breath. "You turned Jan..." Maybe you ran out of venom. Stomach made a gross noise. Gotta fix that now. "You turned Jen just last week," a man's voice, nervous. "Maybe you ran out of venom." Amber bristled at that, and Blaze felt her stand. Put her in the damn cage. Put her in the damn cage and close the hole. She lives, fine. She doesn't, well, we can throw her in with the werverine. For when we finally get Jack. Blaze felt jolts of liquid fire race down her elbows and into her shoulders as two big men came up beside her and lifted her off of the ground. They lowered her to the heavy barred floor inside the cage. It took two of them to pull the massive steel door shut and affix the padlocks into place. Then a group of them was shoving her, cage and all, into the whole contraption moving on smooth metal sliders much like snow skis. As Blaze neared the darkness of the hole, still struggling to breathe against the searing heat enveloping her body, she was assaulted with the overwhelming stench of rot. The werverine, Blaze thought, reeling at the brink of sanity as the second cage and its occupant came into view. This cage did not have metal sliders. This one was welded into place, with fused rebar jammed into the walls and a concrete pad to hold it in place. The corpse was resting in one corner, huddled against the bars. It was wrapped in rusty, putrid chains. Cliffhanger! Next time on Alaskan Fire. We'll find out. I'm not going to spoil anything. Beautiful. So are you actually switching the tracks as you read? Yes, I am. I have here, let me show you. I have this nifty little thing. And see all the buttons with the people while I record. And it swaps the track for me. I bet the most challenging part is dealing with the recording software. Scar, you were correct. Hardware malfunctions, thankfully, are fairly rare. Ken, you are wondering... for today, yes. Because I don't want to jump too far ahead, because we'll want to bring Jeff in to star as Thunderbird. So that was good. That was good stuff. That's a good place to call today, too. That's like you gotta come back, you gotta see what happens, because this is real good. But, Ken, I'm curious why you guys stand while you read all the time, not have a nice chair. Okay, so for me, that's a couple of things. And a lot of narrators do sit, so there's a couple reasons behind that. The big reason for me is I like to move a lot, and so the chair can make noise, and a lot of times I'm actually, like, while I'm recording, especially if, like, a character's in a fighting stance or something like that, it helps me to shift my feet. So I have this mat underneath me, this soft mat, and I wear socks so it doesn't make noise, because otherwise my feet would stick and you'd hear these gross sounds when feet stick to things. So like I'll be shifting my feet around, like going back and forth like this. And that kind of physicality actually really helps me, and I just find it's easier to Thank you, Terry. Oh my gosh, I have such a great time here. Thank you, Terry. I have a great time having you here. But it's easier for me to get into that physical headspace. Yeah. I also am just naturally fidgety, so sitting for extended periods of time kind of drives me mad unless I have something in my hands. But yeah, it's just more of it's just a preference of technique. Ooh, fancy. I assume that's referring to the Stream Deck, Gray. Thank you. It is very fancy. I'm very happy with it. I like to play computer games, but I don't stream. Listening to this while I am playing at the moment, but I'm getting lost in the book and forgetting to play. Well, that's a great compliment. I'm so glad the performance has been immersive. But I'm a fellow computer gamer. Very nice. I get caught up in that. Scar, well, Star, we're glad you found Sound Booth as well. We're always happy to have you here, and I'm really glad you're enjoying. Ken, thanks for the info. Yeah, of course, man. Always happy to talk shop. It's I've learned a lot doing this, and even from being with Sound Booth in the brief time that I have, I learned a lot. Like, they were the ones. Jeff was the one that taught me the track switching trick. So that was immensely helpful. So that, with Blaze now buried alive by a pack of werewolves, that will be where we end today. And the next time we come in, hoo boy, we're gonna have a good time. We get to see what's up with the odd reaction to the werewolf bite and all other sorts of things. Yeah, the Stream Deck is extremely handy. So thank you all, as usual, for joining me. I've had a lovely time both bringing Sarah's work to life and in audio, and just hanging out with all of you. So, oh, thank you for the awesome. Well, thank you, Gray, for stopping in. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Scar and Ken. And there was one that just said Facebook user, so I don't know your name. Thank you, Sin, for stopping in. That's a good rhyme. Thank you, Ted the Mechanic. And thank you, one that just said Facebook user. Ice Nibble. You're all great. So, take care, and I will see you soon.